With global temperatures likely to hit record levels in the next 5 years, finding an efficient air conditioner is becoming more of a priority. In this video, Keri shares information about the various air conditioning options she's tried and explains how and why she installed a 12-volt backpack mini split. This is hands down the most efficient option I've seen, both in terms of initial cost and energy requirements. It's so energy efficient that if you have a decent sized solar system, you could run it without upgrading your electrical, and Keri shares just what it takes energy-wise. And before we dive in, I just want to invite all the women watching to join our Nomadic Women's virtual happy hour on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. You can find the link in our Facebook group, Gal Adventurers.
Hi, I'm Keri. I've been on the road in different rigs for almost 6 years now, and I've tried an exhaustive number of different cooling options in my different rigs. To start, I had a portable unit in my van, a window unit for residential purposes, and I had a good friend who had a jigsaw help me build some frames so that I could install it when I'm parked in my passenger window. The benefits of that setup were that it was cheap. It was about $150 to buy that unit, and I could move it around as needed. The downsides were that while it was very efficient, it took a lot of space. It was 40 or 50 pounds that I had to lift up every time, and it fell out. A variety of other units that I tried were portable units, which are really just very inefficient. I had to get a very large 13,000 BTU unit before it would actually cool my van considerably, and that would toast my 300 amp hours of battery in about an hour and a half. And so while I was glad to have that, it had a big footprint, it was heavy, and it really just wasn't very efficient. The current incarnation is my backpack mini split. This is a 12-volt system that is installed permanently on the back door of my van. It's called a mini split because it consists of two split units. One is the indoor blower unit, which has the thermostat right there, right behind me, and then outside is the condenser and the fan, which switches off and on and provides the refrigeration. I wanted to run an experiment just to see how efficient this actually is. And to give you some idea, my system has 300 amp hours of lithium available to it. I have about 600 watts of solar on the roof. This unit, in a little experiment that we ran, it dropped it to about 80 degrees here. It was 72 degrees over here, so somewhere within the realm of 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And in the half hour that we ran it, it only pulled 20 amp hours. In order to make this a useful experiment, I turned off my solar. I turned it off after the solar had topped me off to 100%. I ran my other appliances, so in other words, my inverter was still on because I wanted to document the fact that I used about, I don't know, between 5 and 10 amps per hour just in my normal use. And we left the unit on with my windows uncovered. My cab, normally I've got a blackout curtain, that was open. Outside, it varied between 84 degrees and almost 90 degrees. It was 89 degrees at some point on a partly cloudy day with the outside sensor in the sun. And we just let it run for half an hour. And it very quickly on eco mode, so in other words, it set itself at 72 degrees Fahrenheit and the blower at half power, and it easily dropped it 10 degrees using 20 amp hours of battery. Within half an hour. We were in and out of here a little bit taking photos, and I heard about 20 minutes in, it had started to cycle itself, and it does that when it's maintaining temperature. It was less than half an hour for it to drop it that 10 degrees. When you're in a van, you're really subject to the ambient temperatures outside. An overhead fan at best is going to keep it the same temperature outside as inside. And I've got this little doll who has 2 fur coats on her, and so keeping her comfortable, keeping her happy, and keeping her safe is really one of the most important things for everything all of my decisions in van life. So being able to walk away knowing that my 300 amp hours of battery are going to be more than enough to keep her comfortable and safe while I go on a hike in a national park where she might not be allowed. If I want to go spend some time in someone else's rig and maybe their dogs are not allowed, it just gives me real peace of mind to know that she's going to be comfortable. And of course, this is Molly, my mini Aussie. She's an adventure Aussie who has her own Instagram at MollyTheMiniTravels _ on Instagram. And when I'm not spending time with Molly, I do have a 9-to-5 job that I conduct from the road. I can't tell you how many days I've had where it's beautiful 75 degrees at 9 in the morning when I start my meetings. Before you know it, it's noon, 1 o'clock. I'm hangry, I haven't had a break in my meetings, but worse yet, my entire van is 90 degrees because my gorgeous parking spot suddenly is in full sun, and I didn't have a minute to get up, rearrange, move somewhere that it might be more comfortable. I think the most important thing when you're working on the road is to recognize that you don't always have the flexibility that others do to drive to higher elevation. You're not necessarily going to have the ability to even drive across the parking lot to get to shaded parking. So the ability to have this really gives me the flexibility to turn it on, set it, and forget it, and be comfortable both for me and to keep her safe when I can't attend her directly. One of the other important things to keep in mind is that while the fan will keep you as comfortable or at the same temperature as it is outside, something like this is really required in order to drop the temperature significantly. The main competitor that I didn't try was a rooftop AC. One of the main reasons that I didn't go for a traditional RV rooftop AC unit, one, I wanted as much room for solar on my roof as possible. I really only have one fan. Two, they are so resource intensive and wildly inefficient. They're not quite as bad as the portable units I tried, but they really require you to be plugged in, and they pull a massive amount of energy. One of the really cool things that I didn't even know before I got this, but I observed it, one of the other issues that this does not have is the hard start problem. Oftentimes when people want to run an RV rooftop AC unit off-grid with a generator with their own batteries, they have to install something called a soft start, because it will cycle up and it'll have a really high energy surge that's required, high energy demand when you first turn it on. This just ramps up and it will go from 200, 300 watts slowly up to 600, so you really don't have to worry about that level of surge. But more importantly, it's only pulling 600 watts versus the 2000 watts plus that you might be using to use a traditional AC unit. So I have 300 amp hours of lithium. I have 600 watts of solar on the roof. That is way more power than you need to run this. I could run that for days and not have issues. 200 amp hours of lithium batteries and maybe 300 or 400 watts of solar on the roof are probably the minimum you would need to support this for regular use. The install was actually pretty easy, and I'll be pretty candid in that the most difficult part was in trying to find the right screws and figuring out how we wanted to situate this unit on my back door. So the unit itself consists of the two parts, including this, the outdoor unit, and the head unit, which is on the inside. The entire install is on this one door. I still have access to open my door. I have full access to my garage underneath, and all of the parts, with one exception, came with the unit. So the kit itself cost me about $700 to $800. I bought it from a reseller on eBay. You can get them yourself on AliExpress for closer to $400 to $500. At the time, I just didn't know that that was an option. This particular unit is from Tree Lego is the brand, but there's dozens of resellers that have very similar, if not identical, units that are resold. The unit itself pulls a maximum of 45 amps, which is about 600 to 700 watts, which is almost nothing, right? It's about the same as my portable, the window unit pulled, the one that I pulled in and out. The install itself was quite straightforward as far as mini splits are concerned. I hadn't dealt with refrigerant lines before, so I had a friend who was generous with his time, and he had installed a bunch of residential units before on other RVs, and he helped me out. One of the most challenging aspects of getting it on here was trying to figure out how we wanted to fit the back face of this unit to the curved door. I have a friend who has one of these, and what he actually did was modify the frame and the structure of it so that he could put it directly against it. What my friend and I did was cut to size a piece of plywood. It's just 3-ply plywood. I painted it with some exterior paint so that it'll be resistant to mildew and the elements. And we fastened this directly to the door. And that gave us a lot more flexibility, because on the inside of the door, there are all kinds of cutouts and weird shapes. And so rather than having to structurally modify the unit itself or the inside and cut through metal, we decided to, by using this piece of wood, we were able to just put holes where it was convenient, and it made sense structurally, both for supporting the weight, but also the internal structure of the door. I had to put 3 holes in my van. There's a hole here for a positive. This is about a 4/0 wire. I'll show you on the other side. There's a negative, and then this is just one big hole. The gasket itself actually came with a kit, and these are the high pressure and low pressure refrigerant lines. And there's one more. This is the electrical connection that sends the information from the thermostat and the computer in the head unit out here, which signals to this outside unit to cycle off or cycle on. Lucky you guys get to see the entire install. You don't have to be too creative to think about how this could be recessed inside the door. Alternatively, you can reach out to some of the resellers on eBay, and they'll even cut these lines to fit. So these are just rubber flexible lines. Mine came with 10 feet. That was more than enough. And for my purposes, I will probably fix this someday, but for now it's fine. Okay, so the lines that come in include a high pressure and low pressure refrigerant line. If you feel it, you can actually feel it's kind of cold. Here's that communication line that goes to the head unit, and then we have the positive and negative, and these just go to my bus bars inside my van. A bus bar is basically the consolidation of all my positive and negatives going in and out of my batteries. The only thing that I added to this install was I put a 100 amp circuit breaker in here. I just prefer to design my electrical systems to overfuse them. That gives me the opportunity to shut off the circuit if for some reason I need to, if I need to do repairs on the unit, without having to turn off all of the rest of my electrical components. I couldn't be happier with this addition to my van. It has given me so much more flexibility in how long I choose to stay somewhere, where I choose to go, how long I would want to hang out with friends. And honestly, with climate change being increasingly more challenging for van lifers, this just gives me more opportunities to spend time in places that I might otherwise have been forced out of.
Keri is never afraid to experiment with her van, and I really appreciate her generosity in sharing the results of her experiments with us. If you liked this video, please share it, and if you'd like to see more van and rig tours, van life tips, and other information to help women get on the road, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos. If you're a woman who would like to join in deeper conversation, join our Facebook group, Gal Adventurers, where I organize our weekly Nomadic Women's virtual happy hour every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific. This is Joni with TheGalavan. Enjoy your journey.